Hello guys, in this chapter we are going to learn about the pivot point of an object. We're also going to learn how to copy objects inside 3ds Max, and we're also going to learn how to group and ungroup objects inside 3ds Max. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Hello guys, let us understand how pivot point works. For that, let us create an object. I'm going to create a box. Click on the box, drag it into the viewport. Now we have a box inside our viewport. Now you will see when I click on the box or select the box, the gizmo of the box is at the bottom of this object. That means the pivot point of this object is at the bottom of the object. So whatever transformation happens to this particular object is happening keeping this point into consideration. Now what do I mean by that? If I move the object, you will see the object moves right left, but if I rotate the object, go to the rotate tool and rotate the object, you will see the object is rotating keeping that point as a center. So the object is getting transformed with that point as a center. Similarly, if I scale this object, you will see the scale is happening keeping that point as a center as well. So whatever transformation is happening to the object is happening keeping that point into consideration, or that point as a center for the transformation. So now you can change the position of the pivot point if you wish to. For that, click on the object, go to the hierarchy tab. Inside the hierarchy tab, you will see adjust pivot. Now click on the affect pivot only button. Once you click on it, you will see the gizmo is changed. Now you can position the pivot point anywhere you like. So let's position to the top of the object. Once you have placed the pivot point to the position of your choice, click the button again to deactivate it. And now you will see the pivot point is placed at the top of the box. So whatever transformation happens to this box is going to happen keeping this point as a center. So if I go to the rotate tool and rotate this box, you will see the rotation happens keeping that point as a center. Now I can also change the pivot point and place it anywhere I like away from the box as well. So click on the affect pivot only, change the location or the position of the pivot point outside the box. Click on the affect pivot only again. Now if I rotate this box, you will see the rotation happens keeping the point as a center. Or if I scale this object, the scale of the object changes keeping this point as a center as well. So this is very important for us to understand how the pivot point works and how the object gets transformed depending on the position of the pivot point that you have chosen. Now you can change or reset the pivot point by going into affect pivot point only. You can place the pivot point back to the center of the object by clicking on the center of the object. If I click on the center to object, this pivot point snaps back to the center of an object. Or you can reset the pivot point to its original position. In our case, it was at the bottom of the box. So if I click on the reset pivot, you will see the pivot point goes back to its original state. Click on the pivot point only affect pivot only. Now we are back to where we started. Now let us learn how to copy objects inside 3ds Max. So let us say we have selected this box. Go to the edit menu, click on the clone. Once you click on the clone, you will see a dialog box. There's clone options. We have copy, instance and reference. Let's say we want to make a copy of this object. Click OK. You will see there is no change. But if you move the object, you will see there are two boxes inside our viewport now. So this is one way in which you can create copies of the object. Let us see another way to create a copy of the object. Now click on the box, press Shift on your keyboard and drag the box. Now once you drag it, you will get a dialog box again, which is similar to the previous dialog box. Here you can see we have copy, instance and reference. But we have one more parameter, says number of copies. Here you can enter the number of copies that you want. Let's say we want to have 3 copies and press OK. Now you can see you have 5 copies of the objects inside viewport. Now the difference between the edit tool and the shift tool is that if I click on this object and go onto the edit tool and press clone, this particular dialog box does not give me the option of numbers, how many objects or how many clones I want to create of this particular object. So using this edit tool, it only creates one object at a time. So if I click on OK, you will see one object is created. But if I click on the shift and drag, it gives me the option to number of copies to be created for the box. Now let's click OK. So now we have another copy. Let's delete all these boxes. So this is the difference between using the edit tool and going and using the shift on your keyboard. Now let us understand the different options while creating the copy of the object. Click on the box, shift and drag. So now we have few other options to create the copy of the object. We have already seen how the copy works. But let's say we create one object with a copy, and when you create a copy of an object, the other object is just a copy of the first object. So whatever changes I make in the parameters of the first object, it does not affect the second object. So what do I mean by that? If I change the height of the first object, you see the second object does not change. But if I create a copy of the first object and set instance, click on instance and press OK. So if I make any changes to this object gets affected as well. So both the objects are instance. If I change this object, the first object also gets affected. So any changes in the parameters will change both the objects. This is something that you have to keep in mind. So let us create another copy. So if I copy this object and now click on reference. So what do you mean by reference? Now the copy is created from this particular object. So whatever changes I make to this object inside the modify stack, this will be changed to this object as well. Now what do I mean by that? If I make any changes over here, you will see this object is getting changed. But if I make any changes to this, and apply a modifier onto this object, let us say I apply a modifier, say chamfer. For example, if I apply a modifier called chamfer, you will see the chamfer modifier is applied to both the objects. But if I apply a modifier to this object, let's say FFD, so you will see I can make the changes to this object, but this object does not get affected because the modifier is not applied to this object, but only the other object. So this object is a reference of this object, but this object is not a reference for this object. So if I make any changes in this, the same changes will appear to this object, but if I make any changes for this object, they will not appear to this object. So that is how the reference works. I hope that makes sense. So these are the ways in which you can copy objects inside 3ds Max. Let's go and delete all these objects and go back to the home. Now let us learn how to group objects inside 3ds Max. For that, go to the Create tab. Inside the Create tab, let's create some objects in the viewport. Let's say I create a box and maybe a cylinder or a teapot. Okay, so we have 3 objects created over here. Let's go to the extended parameters and create few other objects as well. Let's say I create a torus knot, a capsule, a hydra. So now you can see we have few objects inside the viewport and they are placed together here and here. Now I can select all these objects and group them by going into the group and say group. Now we have group 1. Click OK. Now whatever transformation happens, all these objects will be transformed together. So if I move, you can see all the 3 objects are moving together. If I rotate them, they rotate together as well. Or scale them, they get scaled together. Similarly, if I group all these objects, let's say group. So now we have group 2. Same thing over here. They will rotate as a group and they will get scaled as a group as well. But this is how you group the objects and keep them or transform them together. Now you can ungroup them or open them to modify their parameters. For example, if I click on this group, I can open this group and now I can select the individual objects and change their parameters. And select the group and close the group again. Or I can ungroup them if I want to. Now they are no more group and you can see I can select them individually and change them the way I want. So Let us group them together again. Now we have group 3. One thing you have to understand while grouping the objects is you always group the objects that are put together, and they will always be together inside your scene. Now what do I mean by that? If I create an object, let us say I want to create a pyramid. So if I create a pyramid over here and place it inside my viewport and create copies of this object which are placed far from each other. Now we have 5 copies of the pyramid. Now I can select all these copies and then put them inside one group. Let's say group 1. Now these copies will be transformed as a group and move together or rotate them as a group. But this is not the correct way of grouping objects. The objective of grouping is to group the objects that are closer to each other and they will always be together inside the scene. Now, for this particular scenario, all these pyramids are separate from each other and they are scattered inside your scene. They are not together. Now, that's why I'm going to ungroup them. To better give an example, these objects are placed together, these objects are placed together, even though they are apart from each other. So this becomes one group and this becomes another group, even though the objects inside the group are not same. So we have a box, we have a cylinder, we have a teapot. Here we have a capsule, we have a torus knot or a hydra. So they are different objects, but they are placed together. That is why we say they are a group, but they are two different groups because they are separated from one another. That's why whenever you group inside 3ds Max, please keep this in mind, that if the objects are placed apart, you should not group them as they do not belong in a group. So this is the way you can group the objects, or you can ungroup them or open them if you want to edit them. Or you can attach an object to the group as well. Now what do I mean by that? So if I create a sphere over here and place the sphere near this group, now if I select this group, this sphere is still not a part of this group. For the sphere to be the part of this group, select the sphere, go to the group and say attach. Click on the group and now the sphere becomes the part of the group. So this way you can group the objects or attach objects to any group that you have already created, or you can also detach objects from the group as well. For example, if I select on this group and go to the group and say open, select the object that I want and go to the group and say detach. So now the cylinder is no more part of the group. Close the group. Now you see the cylinder is not a part of the group. So this is the way that you can group the objects together, modify them as per your needs, attach different objects to the group, or detach any objects that are inside the group. In the next chapter, I'm going to teach you how to create a model from the primitive objects. So I will see you in the next chapter.